you have to think of it like, oh man, I get to have my own pool of capital. I'm in the middle of developing my own family bank. I am in the middle of creating freedom and autonomy to manage my own capital and keep more of my own money in my pocket for the dollars that I work so hard for. I get to do all those things. And you have to equate that to the management of it.
Welcome to the WinEh podcast. This show is focused on empowering ranchers. Whether you're a seasoned rancher or just getting started, we'll guide you on how to use the infinite banking concept as an alternative way to finance your operations. It's a better way to think about money. Join us as we discuss planning for the future, attracting the next generation, and the art of keeping more money within the family. Here's your hosts, WinEh and Lacy.
Okay, so glad you're able to lean in with us today and join us on the next conversation we're going to have, which is Miss Lacy.
Yeah, so welcome. And today we're going to talk about how can you make the bank option 2 or plan B while you're ranching, but you're also working a full-time job. So how is that possible to do that?
Yeah, so that's a huge question, I think, for anyone that's starting their journey and discovering how can infinite banking concept and like that lifestyle really help me to do that. I think that even from your own personal experience, Lacy, being a ranching family and working full time and building your own family banking system to a place where you no longer have to go to the bank for financing. It's like having a fingerprint. Every single family is got a different timeline than another family because every single ranching or farming operation, it's in a different season. Some families and some operations are going to be able to achieve making the bank plan B an option quicker than others.
Yeah, for sure. And I say this often, if we lined up 100 people in a room, all of our situations would look different. Financial situations, our lifestyles, our medical history would all look different. And so it's really no different when you start talking about, okay, I'm starting this infinite banking journey or I'm looking into it. And how can it be a plan where I can get to that point of the bank is now plan B and something that I have as backup, but that your operation, or even if you're not a rancher or a farmer, how can you get to be where you are your own bank and you rely on yourself, but you still have that backup plan as the bank? And you're right, everybody's timeline is different. So for Reed and I, we're both working off of the ranch, but our end goal is that we can build a family pool of money that we rely on that to fund our ranching operation and not our outside jobs.
You just happen to bring up the word medical history in there. And so perhaps first-time listeners may not understand how medical history plays a role in this equation. Could you maybe speak to that really quickly and then we'll jump back into it?
Yeah, for sure. So the vehicle that we use to implement the infinite banking concept into our lives and our operation is a very specific life insurance policy. So a dividend-paying whole life insurance policy. And so those look different for every single person. So when we set those vehicles up for people, set those policies up for people, if we lined up 100 people, they would look different for everyone. Even though I might be the same age as you, my build is different, my lifestyle is different, my medical history is different. So that's what I'm speaking of. And that all plays a part in the grand plan of what does your vehicle look like that we're going to use to get you to this point where you don't rely on the banks, you rely less on the banks, and everybody's vehicle is different.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time to explain that, Lacy. I'm sure that will generate a ton of other questions, but which would, I hope, inspire those of you that are just jumping in and this is your first episode to kind of go back to episode 1 perhaps, and it'll help to fill in that gap for you. But for right now, as it relates to answering this very specific question, how is it possible for any ranching operation to build a pool of capital, make the bank plan B when you have a full-time job? And I would have to say that not only is a timeline a question of like how, but working with a coach, a dedicated coach that knows how to guide you, working with someone who can really give you that focus so that you keep the end goal in mind is probably the number one thing that's going to help a person make the bank plan B. Because quite often when you're shifting from constantly knowing a lifetime of working with the bank, knowing that they are like seeing and unconsciously believing that they are the source of capital that can make their whole operation happen, it really actually starts with thinking and resetting and working with someone who can constantly remind you and tell you, hey, look, you can do this. You can create your own source of financing. This is the path of how it's going to happen. Is it an easy path? No, but it's also not an easy path being a slave to the lender.
No, that's right.
Right? And so, we said it quite a few times before in our other episodes. It's like, it's hard to constantly be at the mercy of someone else. And is it hard to build your own source of financing? It can be dead easy, but it's actually getting over what's up here in your head and what's in your heart about what you know to be true. Because you're shifting the way that you're thinking, saying, okay, actually, no, I can be the own source of financing. And there is a different way. There is. But you have to be strong enough and willing enough to work with a coach to take the steps that are required in order for you to get to that and to execute the steps that are needed in order for that to happen.
Yeah, because, going back, we always go back to what Nelson said, rethink your thinking. And if you allow yourself to rethink your thinking, and not just once, you have to constantly remind yourself that you're rethinking your thinking and changing the pattern of what you've been taught about money and what you do with your money, how you manage it. And so you just manage it in a different way and in different avenues to achieve the goal. Keeping that end goal in sight, working with a coach, actually doing the things that are in the plan, because if you don't do them, what's a plan or what's a goal if you don't have a plan to achieve it? And so you actually have to implement those things. And once you do that, you will see it happen. You have to have the faith that it's going to happen, and you have to have the patience, because it's not a get rich quick. This is not something that happens overnight. This is a plan that requires you to look many years into the future and keep that end goal in sight. And are you willing to put in the time and the effort of what it takes to keep that end vision in sight? And I always think too, like, imagine how you would feel and what you would be doing when you are sitting at the end and you've achieved that goal. Imagine yourself, like, how would you feel when you arrive and you've achieved the goal that you set out and the reason why you started exploring infinite banking in the first place?
Just very recently, in speaking with an existing client, actually at some point, every single client hits this point. And it is the point at which you really start to recognize that you have to manage this. You have to manage your own pool of capital. You yourself have to make it happen. In order to make it grow, you have to manage it. Like we do right now, we have to manage our finances. Like before you even got on here and started listening to us, you were managing your cash flow. Either there's a lack there of it, or you're in it every day, but you're managing it. If right now financing with a bank is plan A, you're also having to manage that relationship with the bank. You're also having to manage all the administration to get what is needed and what is required in order to keep having financing with the bank, right? You got to have your taxes up to date. You have to move money. Like, you have to be organized with your finances. Yeah. It is no different here. It's the exact same, except you're taking a couple of extra steps in the middle. It's going to feel different. It's going to look different. It's not going to be familiar at first. And that's the hard part initially. Once you know exactly how it works and the rhythm, that it is 100% true, that you can have access to your own money, that it will still continue to, your capital will still continue to grow even while it's in use, that you, all of these things that we kind of talk about in our sessions, that it feels hard at first. And sometimes when you're in the middle of getting ready for harvest, or if you're in the middle of calving season, or if you're in the middle, like there's always something to do on a ranch or on your farm, isn't there?
Oh,
like
yeah. The list is never ending, and it's never done.
Right. And then if you're in partnership with someone, you have to manage that relationship. You have to still be that wife or that husband. If you have kids, now now the list just quadruples because now you got to be there for your kids. And so managing and becoming and making the big plan B, getting there, it does mean like you have to put in the steps, and you have to think of it like, oh man, I get to have my own pool of capital. I am in the process of developing my own pool of capital. I'm in the middle of developing my own family bank. I am in the middle of creating freedom and autonomy to manage my own capital and keep more of my own money in my pocket for the dollars that I work so hard for. I get to do all those things. And you have to equate that to the management of it.
I think we can really speak to how this can really relate to farmers and ranchers, because there's not a farmer or a rancher that is going to say, yeah, I don't want my soil to be healthy, or I want to just run too many cattle on my grass and not have any grass next year. It's no different than that. We in the industry, we look forward. We are forward thinking. How many cattle can I have on this piece of land? How much grass do I have? Is the water sustainable for this year? The farmers, what does the soil health look like? Am I going to have a healthy crop? Are there grasshoppers? There's lots of grasshoppers this year. Just things like that. So this is no different than keeping that end goal in sight on your farm or your ranch for like, how much grass? How do you want to manage your grass? How do you want to manage your cattle? What do you want your calves to look like in the fall when you wean them? How much do you want them to weigh? How much do you want your yearlings to weigh when you sell them in the fall? So this is no different. Keeping that, setting an end goal, doing the things that you have to do to reach that goal. Because if you don't, then you have cattle who don't weigh what you told the buyer they were going to weigh when you sell them. You have calves that weigh way less than you want them to at weaning time. So therefore your profits go down. So this is no different.
Well said, Lacy. It's like equating this. So maybe you can come up with another way to relate it in the world of ranching. So for instance, managing your own family bank, and to grow your family bank. Okay, let's just say in order to get to a place where your family bank is great enough to take over the operating expenses or take over the debt of a piece of equipment or XYZ, right? And in order for that to happen sooner rather than later, right? Because the sooner that you can own all of your own debt and take over the ownership of your own debt, the sooner you no longer, that's the point at which the bank is plan B instead of plan A. That is the point at which you will have greater control over your own finances. So in order to get to that point where it's sooner rather than later, you have to put the money into it. You have to, and the fear and concern, I think, for most people is that if there's only so much cash flow to go around, so there's this fear and concern that it's not liquid, because you have to have the money in order to have all those things, right? And so sometimes I feel everyone gets the concept at first and loves the idea of it. But then once they have like a contract set in place, there's this resistance. There can be this resistance at first to put the money into the contract, right? They're still doing the same old thing, managing their own cash flow. So what would you say that you can relate it to in your world?
Well, first of all, it makes me think of one of my favorite episodes of Mary Jo's podcast, where she was talking to a farmer and she said, you have no problem putting your money into a 401k every year and you can't touch that money. And maybe it wasn't a farmer, but you don't want to put your money into your policy. However, it's still liquid to you. And so that's one, like speaking to the resistance. We're so accustomed to setting our money aside in an RSP or the tax-free savings, whatever it may be, and it not being liquid to us, or there being consequences of accessing that cash. But I think like I would relate the building of the pool of money to, if you have a cow-calf operation, if you run too many cattle, so if I run too many cow-calf pairs on my piece of land this year, then I've overgrazed it. The health of my grass is not going to be where it should be. Therefore, I'm not able to grow the next year. Maybe the next year we get ample rain, but I overgrazed it the year before, so I still can't add cattle. Like, it's no different than, it's really relatable to that in a sense where each year us as ranchers, we want to be able to keep back more of our heifers to replace the older cows. Maybe we want to grow our herd every year. But if we're not doing the things to manage the grass that they're eating and the water sources that they have, if we're not managing their health, we're not going to grow that herd. And if we don't grow the herd, our income doesn't grow. And so this is no different. If you don't manage the vehicles that you put in place, the contracts that you put in place, if you don't manage them and maximize them to their potential, then you're not going to see the results you want to see.
Yeah, making bank plan B is not going to be the result. And to add to it, it's like beyond achieving the amazing idea of like, hey, just imagine I no longer need the bank going forward. There is another sort of result that we're not talking about at this moment, which is that reduces stress. You can't quantify that. Not only do you not have to constantly be in the position where you have to do all the things to qualify. We all know that. And then that means like you got to get in a rush. Like, not to say that I guess there's pros and cons. Like, if you need to have the money lent to you with a traditional bank, it forces one to do their taxes because you have to be up to date with your taxes in order as a requirement to get a loan. I guess that's really good. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't still apply that same internal pressure to do the same, because therein lies like a completely different issue altogether. But it's nice to put yourself into a position where you have some more grace to not have to.
Mm-hmm. And if we can do that little by little each year, right? Little by little, we're putting money away into our policy. And each year, little by little, we're taking back debt from the bank till eventually we wake up where we've reached our goal and we are no longer a slave to the bank. Because if I'm going to owe money to somebody, I want to owe it to myself, nobody else.
Amen. And so I guess really the next piece and I'm just getting more ramped up in terms of like what other benefits there are to it. But I think to really solidify, like there's a ton of you out there who really need to have numbers. Like, how does this actually really look? I mean, we've been talking about the idea that it's a possibility, and it is 100%. We're here to make that declaration. You know, what can they do right now, Lacy, to help them go through the actual physical case study?
Yeah, good question. So you can head over to our website, ranchyourway.com, and pre-order your Canadian version of Farming Without the Bank. So this is only on for a very short time here before we get the hard copy published, which will be right away. And so go over there, save yourself with some shipping. And in that book, you are going to find case studies that I promise you will be able to relate to, go through, see some real live numbers that are going to help you wrap your mind around how this can actually work.
Yeah, to add to what you're saying, Lacy, like at the time of this recording, it is early September 2024. We fully expect to have our book published by end of September 2024. So if you're listening to this after, you're going to have to pay shipping. That's just the way that it is. And it's actually the Farm Without the Bank book, Canadian version. And the first case study is the one that you want to see that directly speaks to this particular topic today.
Awesome. So send us questions, comments, feedback at wecare@ranchyourway.com and head over to our website, ranchyourway.com, and purchase your book.
Ciao.
So glad you leaned in with us on the WinEh podcast. We truly hope you're feeling more informed and empowered to take another step towards optimizing your financial life. Right now, make sure you hit subscribe so you can keep growing and learning with us. Until next time, we wish you prosperity in every area of your life.